Stand down. That was what Commander Brett Harlan said to her, his voice carrying the particular contempt that men like him reserved for women who wandered into spaces they considered their own. Stand down, Lieutenant. You are out of your depth here. Tessa Vance said nothing. She simply looked at him with eyes that had watched men die in rooms that did not exist on any official map, and she waited. The junior officer, standing behind Harlan, took an unconscious step backward. Something about the way this woman held herself, the absolute stillness of her, made the air feel different. But Harlan did not notice. Men like him never did. 12 hours earlier, Tessa had arrived at Naval Station Mayport with transfer orders that described her as a logistics liaison officer, temporary assignment, routine paperwork processing. The petty officer who checked her credentials barely glanced at her face before stamping the forms and pointing toward the administrative building. She carried one duffel bag. She wore her uniform without a single ribbon that would draw attention. Everything about her said ordinary, forgettable, not worth a second look. Before we continue with Tessa's story, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have seen how quickly people judge others by their appearance before knowing the truth. The administrative building smelled like every military office Tessa had ever entered. That particular combination of industrial cleaning solution and old coffee and paper that had been circulating through the same tired air conditioning system for decades. A chief petty officer named Darius Okonkwo processed her arrival with the weary efficiency of a man who had done this 10,000 times before. He was older, late 40s, with gray threading through his close-cropped hair and the kind of watchful eyes that suggested he noticed more than he let on. "Welcome to Mayport," he said without looking up from his computer. "Logistics liaison. That is a new one. Usually they just send emails." Tessa offered a small smile. "I prefer to see things in person." Okonkwo glanced up at that, studied her for a moment, then returned to his screen. "Your office is in Building 7, basement level. You will need to requisition your own supplies because nobody down there has ordered anything since the last person left." "When was that?" 8 months ago. He transferred out suddenly. "Family emergency," they said. Something in the way he said it made Tessa file the information away. She thanked him and headed for Building 7, passing rows of administrative offices where sailors typed at computers and officers walked with folders tucked under their arms. A normal day on a normal base. Except Tessa had learned long ago that normal was usually just a costume that secrets wore when they wanted to hide in plain sight. Her office was exactly as Okonkwo had described. A basement room with flickering fluorescent lights, a metal desk that had probably been requisitioned during the Cold War, and a computer so old it wheezed when she turned it on. A fine layer of dust covered every surface. Nobody had been here in months. Nobody cared about this space or the person assigned to fill it. Perfect. She spent the first 2 hours establishing her cover, logging into systems, sending routine emails, creating a paper trail that would satisfy anyone who bothered to check. Then she accessed a different system entirely, one that required 3 separate authentication codes and a retinal scan on her phone. The message was waiting for her. Asset in place. Observe and report. Targets include base supply chain irregularities and personnel of interest. Do not engage without authorization. Handler confirms additional assets positioning within 72 hours. Tessa read it twice, then deleted it using protocols that left no digital trace. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the mission settle onto her shoulders. Somewhere on this base, people were stealing from the Navy. Equipment meant for American service members was disappearing into a pipeline that ended with enemies overseas. The trail had led here, to Mayport, to someone with enough rank and access to make millions of dollars worth of hardware vanish without anyone asking questions. She thought of Marcus. She always thought of Marcus when a mission began. Her younger brother, 26 years old forever, killed by an IED built with components that should never have left American control. 3 years she had spent tracing the supply chain, following the money, learning names. 3 years of becoming someone who could go places others could not, see things others missed, and deliver justice that no courtroom would ever provide. The door to her office opened without a knock. Tessa looked up to see a man in commander insignia stepping inside like he owned the space, which technically he did. Brett Harlan was tall, well-built, with the kind of confident bearing that came from a career of people deferring to his rank. His eyes swept over her with immediate dismissal. "So you're the new logistics person," he said. "I wanted to introduce myself personally. Commander Brett Harlan. I run operations on this base, which means anything that moves through here moves through me. You have questions about supply chains, you bring them to my office. Clear?" Tessa stood, maintaining proper military bearing. "Perfectly clear, Commander." "Good." He smiled, but did not reach his eyes. "We run a tight operation here. Efficient. I do not like disruptions, and I do not like people poking around in things that are not their concern. You are here to process paperwork, Lieutenant. Nothing more." "Understood, sir." He nodded, satisfied with her compliance, and left without another word. Tessa sat back down and allowed herself a small smile. Men like Harlan always underestimated quiet women. They saw deference and assumed weakness. They saw compliance and assumed control. They never saw the predator until it was far too late. That night, Tessa walked the base after dark, memorizing the layout, noting the patrol patterns, watching which buildings had activity at unusual hours. Warehouse 7, the one Harlan had mentioned during their brief meeting, had trucks arriving at 11 p.m. Unmarked trucks, sailors unloading crates without the usual documentation visible. She observed from the shadows, patient as stone, recording everything in her memory. Tomorrow she would begin asking questions. Small questions at first, innocent questions, the kind a confused logistics officer might ask. And she would watch very carefully to see who became nervous when she asked them. The night air carried the salt smell of the nearby ocean. Somewhere across the base, a dog barked twice and fell silent. Tessa touched the chain around her neck where her brother's dog tags rested against her heart, hidden beneath her uniform. "I am here, Marcus," she whispered. "I am close." Then she disappeared back into the darkness, leaving no trace she had ever been there at all. The morning brought humidity that clung to everything like a second skin, the Florida heat already pressing down on the base by 0700. Tessa arrived at her basement office early, coffee in hand, playing the part of a diligent officer trying to make a good impression. She spent the first hour reviewing supply manifests, cross-referencing shipment logs, building a picture of how materials flowed through Mayport. On the surface, everything looked proper. But Tessa had learned to read the spaces between the lines, the patterns that emerged when you knew what questions to ask. By 0900, she had identified 17 shipments over the past 6 months that showed discrepancies. Equipment signed out to units that had no record of receiving it. Maintenance parts logged as delivered but never installed. The amounts were small enough individually to escape notice, but together they formed a pattern that pointed toward systematic theft. She printed nothing. She saved nothing to the base servers. Everything stayed locked in her memory, a skill she had developed during years of operating in environments where leaving a paper trail meant leaving a death warrant. A knock on her door interrupted her work. She minimized her screen and called out an invitation to enter. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo stepped inside, carrying a folder and wearing the expression of a man who had drawn the short straw on an unpleasant assignment. "Lieutenant Vance, Commander Harlan asked me to deliver these personally. New protocols for supply chain documentation. He wants you to review and sign off by end of day." Tessa accepted the folder, flipping through pages of bureaucratic language that essentially demanded she route all inquiries through Harlan's office. A leash disguised as procedure. "Thank you, Chief. I will review these thoroughly." Okonkwo lingered in the doorway, something unspoken in his eyes. She waited, letting the silence do its work. People often filled silence with truths they had not intended to share. The last logistics officer, he finally said, "Peterson." He asked a lot of questions, too. Good man. Thorough. What happened to him? Family emergency. That is what the paperwork said. Okonkwo's voice carried a careful neutrality. But Peterson did not have any family. His parents died when he was young. No siblings. No wife. Just the Navy. Tessa absorbed this information without changing expression. That'd sound like an unusual family emergency. Okonkwo met her eyes for a long moment, and she saw the warning there, the quiet plea for her to understand without him having to speak more directly. Then he nodded once and left, closing the door softly behind him. Tessa sat back in her chair, turning this new piece over in her mind. Peterson had asked questions and disappeared. The official story was a lie, which meant someone on this base had the power to make people vanish and the connections to create convincing cover stories that required rank, resources, and the kind of ruthlessness that did not hesitate to eliminate problems permanently. She thought of Harlan's smile, the one that never reached his eyes. The afternoon brought an opportunity she had not expected. While walking through the administrative building, she encountered a young petty officer struggling with an armload of files that had begun sliding toward disaster. Tessa stepped forward and caught the stack just before it cascaded across the hallway floor. "Thank you, ma'am," the sailor said, face flushed with embarrassment. He was young, maybe 22, with earnest eyes and the slightly overwhelmed look of someone still learning the rhythms of Navy bureaucracy. His name, Tag Red Vega. "I'm sorry. Commander Harlan wants these filed by 1400, and I have been running all morning." Tessa helped him reorganize the stack. "No apology needed, Petty Officer Vega. We have all had days like this." He looked at her with surprised gratitude, clearly unaccustomed to officers showing patience. "Most of the brass around here would have written me up for blocking the hallway." "Well, I'm not most of the brass." She offered a small smile. "What department do you work in?" "Logistics support, ma'am. Supply documentation mostly. Filing, data entry, that kind of thing." Tessa felt a small spark of interest. "Then we might be working together. I'm a new logistics liaison." Vega's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something that might have been concern quickly masked. "Oh, welcome to Mayport, ma'am. I'm sure you will find everything in order." "I am sure I will," Tessa said pleasantly, noting the reaction and filing it away. That evening, alone in her temporary quarters, Tessa allowed herself the ritual she performed at the start of every mission. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed and removed the chain from around her neck, holding the dog tags in her palm. Marcus Allen Vance, his blood type, his religious preference, all the information the military needed to identify a body. He had been so proud when he made it through basic training. She remembered his smile during their video calls from Afghanistan, the way he talked about his squad like they were family. He had believed in the mission, believed in service, believed that what he was doing mattered. And then he was gone. One IED on a road outside Kandahar, and 26 years of life reduced to a flag-draped coffin and a knock on their mother's door. The investigation afterward had revealed the terrible truth. The triggering device in that IED contained components that had been manufactured in Ohio, shipped to a military depot in Virginia, and then vanished from the supply chain somewhere between there and legitimate military use. American technology, stolen by American hands, sold to people who used it to kill American soldiers. Tessa had spent 3 years following that trail. She had given up a normal life, a normal career, a chance at the kind of future most people took for granted. She had volunteered for training programs that broke most candidates. She had become something harder and sharper than the sister Marcus had known. And now she was here, in a basement office on a Florida naval base, hunting the people who made the theft possible. She closed her fingers around the dog tags, feeling the metal edges press into her palm. "I will find them," she whispered. "Every single one of them." She replaced the chain around her neck and began preparing for the next day. Tomorrow she would push harder, ask more pointed questions, and watch to see who flinched. Someone on this base knew where Peterson had really gone, and Tessa intended to find out. 3 days into her assignment, Tessa had mapped the entire supply chain operation at Mayport. She knew which warehouses received shipments on which days, which personnel had access to sensitive inventory, and which officers signed off on documentation without actually reviewing it. The corruption was elegant in its simplicity. Small amounts diverted consistently over time, hidden within the massive flow of legitimate military logistics. Someone had designed this system with patience and intelligence, qualities that made them far more dangerous than a simple thief. She was reviewing inventory discrepancies in her basement office when footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy footsteps, moving with purpose. Tessa minimized her screen and folded her hands on the desk, just as Commander Harlan appeared in her doorway. Lieutenant Vance. He did not wait for an invitation before entering. I have been reviewing your access logs. You have been requesting files from departments outside your purview. I am trying to understand how the base operates, Commander. Context helps me do my job more effectively. Harlan moved closer, using his height to loom over her desk. Your job is to process paperwork that crosses your desk, not to go hunting through records that have nothing to do with logistics liaison work. With respect, sir, supply chain efficiency requires understanding the full picture. I cannot identify bottlenecks if I only see one piece of the process. Something flickered in Harlan's eyes. Annoyance, certainly, but something else beneath it. Wariness, perhaps. The look of a man who had grown comfortable in his domain and did not appreciate anyone disturbing the arrangement. Let me be clear, he said, his voice dropping to a tone that carried unmistakable threat. Warehouse 7 is off limits to your inquiries. The operations there are classified above your clearance level. If I find you accessing those files again, I will have you transferred so fast your head will spin. Do you understand me? Tessa met his gaze without flinching. Perfectly, Commander. He held the stare for a long moment, searching for something in her expression. She gave him nothing. Finally, he nodded, apparently satisfied with her compliance, and left without another word. Tessa waited until his footsteps faded completely before allowing herself to breathe. Warehouse 7. He had specifically named it, confirming what she had suspected from her nighttime observations. Whatever was happening on this base, that warehouse was at the center of it. She needed more information, but she could not access it through official channels without triggering Harlan's surveillance, which meant she needed an unofficial source. Chief Okonkwo found her in the mess hall during lunch, sitting alone at a corner table with a tray of food she had barely touched. He approached with his own tray and raised an eyebrow in silent question. She nodded toward the empty seat across from her. Mind if I join you, ma'am? Eating alone is bad for digestion. Tessa smiled slightly. I have heard that. Please. He sat down and began eating with the methodical efficiency of someone who had spent decades grabbing meals between duties. For several minutes, neither of them spoke, allowing the ambient noise of the mess hall to provide cover for their proximity. Finally, Okonkwo said, without looking up from his food, "You got the Harlan visit this morning. Word travels fast. Everything travels fast on a base this size. Except paperwork. That moves like molasses." He took a sip of coffee. He gave you the speech about staying in your lane? Something like that. Okonkwo set down his fork and met her eyes directly. I have been on this base for 6 years, Lieutenant. I have seen a lot of officers come and go. The smart ones learn quick that there are questions you ask and questions you do not ask. The ones who cannot figure out the difference tend to have short tours here. Is that what happened to Peterson? The chief's expression did not change, but something shifted in his posture. A slight tension in his shoulders. Peterson was a good officer. Thorough. Maybe too thorough for his own good. And now he is gone. Now he is gone, Okonkwo agreed. Family emergency. The lie hung between them, acknowledged by both, challenged by neither. Tessa leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. Chief, I'm not here to make trouble for people just doing their jobs. But I'm also not here to look the other way when something is wrong. If there is something I should know, something that would help me understand what I'm walking into, I would consider it a professional courtesy. Okonkwo studied her for a long moment. She could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the weighing of risks against conscience, self-preservation against duty. There is a company, he said finally, his voice barely above a murmur. Meridian Defense Solutions. They have contracts for equipment maintenance and logistics support. Their trucks come and go from Warehouse 7 at odd hours. Nobody questions it because the paperwork is always perfect. Too perfect if you ask me. Who signs off on their access? Okonkwo did not answer directly. He simply looked at her, and the silence said everything. Harlan. I did not say that, the chief said, standing and picking up his tray. I did not say anything at all. We just had lunch, Lieutenant. That is all. He walked away without looking back, leaving Tessa alone with the weight of confirmation settling into her chest. Meridian Defense Solutions. A name to research, a thread to pull, and Commander Brett Harlan at the center of whatever web connected them to this base. That night, she accessed her secure channel and sent a brief message to her handler. Meridian Defense Solutions confirmed as Vector. Harlan confirmed as primary contact, requesting background on MDS corporate structure and financial connections. The response came within an hour. MDS flagged in 3 previous investigations. Connections to diverted military equipment in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. No prosecutions due to insufficient evidence. Harlan financial records show unexplained deposits consistent with kickback payments. You are authorized to continue observation. Do not engage directly. Additional assets arriving in 48 hours. Tessa read the message twice, then deleted it. 3 previous investigations. No prosecutions. People like Harlan have been doing this for years, protected by connections and paperwork and the sheer complexity of military bureaucracy. But they had never been investigated by someone like her. She checked her weapon, secured her quarters, and settled in to wait. 48 hours until backup arrived. 48 hours to gather enough evidence to ensure that this time Harlan would not escape justice. Somewhere on this base, her brother's killers were sleeping soundly, confident in their safety. They would not be sleeping soundly for much longer. The next morning brought a development Tessa had not anticipated. Petty Officer Vega appeared at her office door, glancing nervously down the hallway before stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "Ma'am, I need to talk to you." His voice was tight, barely above a whisper. "I do not know who else to go to." Tessa gestured toward the chair across from her desk. "Sit down, Petty Officer. Take a breath. What is going on?" Vega sat on the edge of the seat, his knee bouncing with anxious energy. "I work in supply documentation, filing, data entry, all the boring stuff nobody pays attention to. But I pay attention, ma'am. I notice things." "What kind of things?" He swallowed hard. "Discrepancies. Shipments that get logged in but never logged out. Equipment manifests that do not match what actually gets loaded onto trucks. I thought maybe I was making mistakes at first, so I started keeping my own records. Unofficial, just to check myself." Tessa kept her expression neutral, even as her pulse quickened. "And what did your records show?" "They showed I was not making mistakes." Vega's eyes met hers, and she saw fear there, but also something else. Determination. "Millions of dollars worth of equipment, ma'am. Over the past 2 years. Just gone. And every single discrepancy traces back to Warehouse 7. Have you told anyone else about this?" He shook his head quickly. "I tried to bring it up with my supervisor once. Just casually, asking about the procedures. He told me to focus on my own work and stop asking questions." The next day, Commander Harlan showed up in our office for an inspection. He never does inspections. He stood right next to my desk and talked about how important it was for everyone to stay in their lanes. He looked right at me when he said it. Tessa understood. Harlan had eyes everywhere, ears everywhere. Someone had reported Vega's questions, and the commander had delivered a personal warning. "Petty Officer Vega," she said carefully, "I appreciate you coming to me. That took courage. But I need you to understand that what you are describing is serious. If you were right, there are people on this base who have a lot to lose. People who have already shown they are willing to make problems disappear." "I know," Vega said. "I know about Peterson. Everyone knows, even if nobody talks about it. But I joined the Navy to serve my country, ma'am. Not to look the other way while people steal from it." Looking at him, Tessa saw echoes of her brother. That same earnest belief in doing the right thing. That same willingness to stand up even when standing up was dangerous. It made her want to protect him even as she recognized how valuable his information could be. "I want you to listen to me carefully," she said. "Do not change your routine. Do not ask any more questions. Do not tell anyone else what you have told me. Go back to your work and act like this conversation never happened." "Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am. But what are you going to do?" I'm going to do my job, Tessa said, just like you're going to do yours. Trust me. Vega nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Mom, thank you for listening. I was starting to think I was crazy, seeing things that were not there. You're not crazy, petty officer. You are paying attention. That is a rare quality. After he left, Tessa sat motionless for several minutes, processing the implications. Vega had just handed her independent corroboration of everything she had suspected. A witness who had documented discrepancies, who could testify to the pattern of theft. He was also now a target, whether he fully understood that or not. That evening, she followed Harlan at a distance when he left the base. He drove a black sedan with tinted windows, heading into Jacksonville proper. She stayed 3 cars back, varying her distance, using every surveillance technique she had learned in training. Harlan drove to a restaurant in the Riverside district, upscale but not flashy. The kind of place where business deals happened over expensive steaks and good wine. She parked across the street and watched through binoculars as Harlan entered and was greeted by a man in a civilian suit. They shook hands like old friends and disappeared into a private dining room. Tessa photographed the man's face and the license plate of the Mercedes he had arrived in. Later that night, she ran the plate through channels that officially did not exist. The car was registered to a corporation called Meridian Defense Solutions. The man's name was Victor Ashworth, listed as their Director of Government Relations. Director of Government Relations, a polite title for the person responsible for bribing military officers. She encrypted the photographs and sent them to her handler along with a brief report. Harlan meeting confirmed with MDS executive Victor Ashworth. Relationship appears established and ongoing. Junior enlisted member Vega has independent documentation of supply discrepancies. Request guidance on source protection. The response came at 0300. Ashworth, known associate of foreign intermediaries. Previous attempts at prosecution blocked by legal complications. Your source is valuable but vulnerable. Recommend no further contact until operation concludes. Assets arriving tomorrow. Maintain cover. Tessa read the message in the blue glow of her phone screen, then deleted it. Vega was valuable but vulnerable. The clinical language of intelligence work, reducing a young sailor's courage to an operational asset. She thought about Peterson, the logistics officer who had asked too many questions and vanished into a convenient lie. She thought about her brother, who had trusted that the equipment protecting him would actually be there when he needed it. No more, she whispered to the darkness. No more disappearances. No more convenient lies. Tomorrow the additional assets would arrive. Tomorrow the operation would enter its next phase. And Commander Brett Harlan, who had spent years selling out his country for money, would begin to understand that his time was running out. But first she needed to make sure Vega stayed safe. She would not let another good sailor become collateral damage in someone else's greed. The call came at 20 to 100 hours. Tessa was reviewing her notes when her secure phone vibrated with an emergency alert. She read the message and felt her blood turn cold. Source compromised. Vega attacked outside base perimeter. Civilian hospital Jacksonville. Condition unknown. She was in her car within 90 seconds, driving through the Florida night with her hands steady on the wheel, even as her mind raced through scenarios. How had they known? She had been careful. Vega had been careful. Someone must have seen him enter her office, must have reported the length of time he stayed, must have decided he was a threat worth eliminating. The hospital was a maze of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. She flashed her military ID at the front desk and asked for information on a sailor brought in with assault injuries. The nurse directed her to the 3rd floor trauma unit. She found Vega in a room at the end of the hallway, hooked to monitors that beeped a steady rhythm. His face was swollen, one eye completely closed, his lips split and stitched. But he was alive. He was breathing. When she stepped into the room, his good eye opened and found her face. Mom. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. They jumped me in the parking lot. 2 guys. Said I should learn to mind my own business. Did you see their faces? He shook his head slightly, wincing at the movement. Ski mask. But one of them had a tattoo on his wrist. An anchor with a snake around it. I saw it when he hit me. Tessa filed the detail away. Navy tattoo, likely active duty or recent veteran. Harlan had not hired outside contractors. He had used his own people. Vega, listen to me. You're going to be safe here. I'm going to make sure of it. But I need you to stay quiet about what you told me. No matter who asks, no matter what they say. Can you do that? He managed something like a smile despite his ruined face. I already told the cops it was a random mugging. Wrong place, wrong time. Good man. She stayed with him until he fell asleep, the pain medication pulling him under. Then she stepped into the hallway and made a call on her secure line. My source was attacked, she said when her handler answered. They know I am asking questions. My cover is compromised. The response was calm, measured. We are aware. Assets are in position. We are accelerating the timeline. Return to base and maintain normal routine tomorrow. Do not engage Harlan directly. He tried to have a sailor killed. We cannot prove that yet. If you move now without sufficient evidence, he walks and disappears. We need him connected to Ashworth and Meridian on record. 24 more hours, Lieutenant Commander. That is all we need. Tessa closed her eyes, forcing down the anger that threatened to cloud her judgment. 24 hours. In 24 hours, more evidence could disappear. More people could get hurt. But her handler was right. Moving too soon meant losing everything. Understood, she said, and ended the call. She returned to base as dawn was breaking over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed obscene given what had happened in the darkness. She showered, changed into a fresh uniform, and walked to her office as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She could feel eyes on her now, the weight of surveillance that had shifted from passive to active. When she passed other sailors in the hallway, she noted which ones looked away too quickly, which ones seemed to be tracking her movement. At 0900, Commander Harlan appeared in her doorway. His expression was pleasant, concerned even, the mask of a superior officer checking on his people. Lieutenant Vance, I heard about the incident with Petty Officer Vega. Terrible thing. Random violence seems to be getting worse everywhere these days. Tessa looked up from her desk, keeping her face neutral. Yes, sir. Very unfortunate. I understand you visited him at the hospital last night. Harlan stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. That was kind of you. But I have to ask, why would a logistics liaison officer drive all the way to Jacksonville in the middle of the night for an enlisted man she barely knows? Petty Officer Vega helped me with some filing my first week here. I wanted to make sure he was all right. Harlan nodded slowly, but his eyes were hard. Generous of you. Some might say unusually generous. I believe in taking care of our people, Commander. Is that not what the Navy teaches us? The silence stretched between them, charged with meanings neither would speak aloud. Harlan was studying her now with new intensity, reevaluating, calculating. She could see the exact moment he decided she was more than she appeared to be. You know, he said quietly, I have been in the Navy for 22 years. I have learned to recognize when someone is not what their paperwork says they are. The good news is, I'm a reasonable man. If someone were to realize they had wandered into something beyond their understanding, something that would be better left alone, I might be inclined to help them find a graceful exit. A transfer, perhaps. Somewhere far from Florida. Tessa met his gaze without blinking. That is very generous, Commander, but I am quite happy with my current assignment. Another long moment passed. Then Harlan smiled, a cold expression that did not reach his eyes. I hope you stay that way, Lieutenant. I truly do. He left without another word, and Tessa sat motionless at her desk, feeling the crosshairs settle onto her back. Her cover was not just compromised. It was shattered. Harlan knew she was investigating him. He knew she had connected with Vega, and now he was deciding whether she was a problem that could be warned off or a problem that needed to be eliminated. She had 24 hours to survive before backup arrived. She intended to make them count. Lieutenant Junior Grade Megan Fry found Tessa in the mess hall that afternoon, sliding into the seat across from her with the casual confidence of someone who belonged wherever she chose to sit. She was young, maybe 28, with sharp features and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. You're the logistics officer everyone is talking about, Fry said. The one Commander Harlan cannot seem to stop mentioning in staff meetings. Tessa set down her fork. I was not aware I had become a topic of discussion. Oh, you have. Fry leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. He has mentioned you 3 times in the past 2 days. Always casual, always in passing. How the new logistics liaison is very thorough. How she asks a lot of questions. How we should all make sure she has everything she needs to do her job. That sounds almost supportive. It sounds like a warning. Frey's eyes locked onto hers. I work in intelligence, Lieutenant. I know what it looks like when someone is being marked. Tessa studied the younger woman, weighing the risks of engagement against the potential value of an ally inside Harlan's circle. Why are you telling me this? Because I have been on this base for 18 months, and I have seen things that do not add up. Shipments that vanish. Officers who ask questions and then suddenly get transferred. A commander who lives way beyond what his salary should allow. Fry glanced around the mess hall, confirming no one was within earshot. I joined the Navy because I believed in something. I did not sign up to be part of whatever Harlan is running. What do you think he is running? I think equipment is leaving this base and ending up somewhere it should not. I think Meridian Defense Solutions is involved. And I think anyone who gets too close to the truth ends up like Peterson. Tessa felt her pulse quicken. You knew Peterson? We were friends. He was a good officer, thorough, principled. He started noticing discrepancies in the supply chain about 6 months before he disappeared. He came to me with his concerns because he trusted me. Frey's voice tightened. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Family emergency, they said. But Peterson grew up in foster care. He did not have any family. The same detail Okonkwo had shared. Confirmation from a second source. What do you think happened to him? Fry was silent for a long moment. Then she said, I think he is dead. I think Harlan had him killed. And I think the Navy helped cover it up because exposing the truth would embarrass too many people. The words hung between them, heavy with implications. If Fry was right, this conspiracy extended beyond Harlan, beyond Meridian, into the institutional structures that were supposed to prevent exactly this kind of corruption. Why come to me now? Tessa asked. Why take this risk? Because you're different. I can see it in the way you carry yourself. The way you did not back down when Harlan tried to intimidate you. You're not just a logistics officer any more than I am just an intelligence analyst. Fry leaned back, crossing her arms. I do not know who you really are or who sent you, but I know you are here to take Harlan down, and I want to help. Tessa made a decision. If she was wrong about Fry, she was about to hand Harlan everything he needed to destroy her. But her instincts said Fry was genuine, and in this work, instincts were often all you had. What I'm about to tell you does not leave this table, she said quietly. If you repeat it to anyone, we are both dead. Understood. I am not a logistics liaison. I am attached to a joint task force investigating the diversion of military equipment to hostile foreign actors. Commander Harlan is our primary target. Meridian Defense Solutions is the pipeline. And you are right about Peterson. We believe he was eliminated because he got too close to the truth. Fry absorbed this without visible surprise. What do you need from me? Access. Harlan trusts you, or at least does not suspect you. I need to know what is in Warehouse 7. I need documentation linking Harlan directly to Meridian payments. And I need it within the next 12 hours. 12 hours? Why the rush? Because Harlan knows I am investigating him. After what happened to Vega, he is going to move fast to protect himself. If we do not get the evidence before he destroys it, he walks free. Again, Fry nodded slowly. I can get into his office. He keeps a personal laptop separate from the base network. If the financial records exist, they will be there. It is dangerous. If he catches you, I cannot protect you. I know. Fry stood, smoothing her uniform. But Peterson deserved better than a lie about a family he never had. And I did not join the Navy to watch criminals wear the same uniform I do. She walked away without looking back, leaving Tessa alone with the weight of what she had just set in motion. That night, Tessa could not sleep. She lay in her quarters, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the people now caught in the orbit of this operation. Vega in a hospital bed, Fry risking her career and her life. Okonkwo carrying suspicions he had been too afraid to voice for years. And somewhere in the shadows, the ghost of Peterson, the officer who had tried to do the right thing and paid for it with everything. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. She read it in the darkness. Fry successful. Files obtained. Evidence confirms Harlan receiving payments from Meridian totaling $2.3 million over 4 years. Additional evidence shows equipment diverted to intermediaries with confirmed connections to hostile actors in Syria and Yemen. Syria and Yemen, the same regions where American soldiers had died from weapons that should never have reached enemy hands. Tessa closed her eyes, and for the first time since arriving at Mayport, she allowed herself to believe that justice might actually be possible. But the operation was not over yet. Harlan was still free, still dangerous, still capable of making people disappear. Tomorrow, that would change. The morning of the 6th day began like any other. Sailors moved across the base in their daily rhythms, unaware that the ground beneath them was about to shift. Tessa reported to her basement office at 0700, maintaining the illusion of routine even as every nerve in her body hummed with anticipation. The evidence Fry had obtained was already in the hands of her handler, being processed and verified for the operation that would unfold within hours. All Tessa had to do was wait, stay visible, and avoid giving Harlan any reason to accelerate his own timeline. But Harlan had other plans. At 0930, 2 masters-at-arms appeared at her office door. "Lieutenant Vance, you need to come with us." Tessa looked up from her computer, keeping her expression calm. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "Commander Harlan has filed a formal complaint. You are being detained pending investigation into allegations of unauthorized access to classified systems, insubordination, and conduct unbecoming an officer." She could have resisted. She could have revealed her true authorization and watched their faces change. But doing so would alert Harlan that his trap had failed, would give him time to destroy evidence or flee. So instead she stood, straightened her uniform, and allowed them to escort her out of the building. The brig was a small concrete structure near the edge of the base, utilitarian and cold. They processed her with professional efficiency, taking her personal effects, her phone, her identification. She was placed in a holding cell with a metal cot and a single window too small and too high to offer any view. She sat on the cot and waited. Hours passed. The light through the window shifted from morning brightness to afternoon gold. No one came to question her. No one came to explain the charges. The silence was deliberate, designed to create uncertainty and fear. Tessa felt neither. She had been in worse places than this, held by people far more dangerous than Brett Harlan. She had learned to find stillness in captivity, to conserve her energy for the moment when action would matter. As evening approached, she heard footsteps in the corridor. The door to her cell opened, and Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo stepped inside, his face tight with controlled anger. 5 minutes, he said quietly. That is all I could arrange. She stood to face him. What is happening out there? Harlan is claiming you are a foreign agent. He is saying you infiltrated the base to steal classified information. He has already contacted NCIS and requested an emergency investigation. That is absurd. My credentials are legitimate. I know that. You know that. But Harlan has friends in places that matter, and right now he is controlling the narrative. Okonkwo stepped closer, lowering his voice. Fry came to me this morning. She told me what you really are, what you are really doing here. She said you need to hold on a little longer. Help is coming. When? She did not say, but she looked scared, Lieutenant. Whatever is happening, it is bigger than any of us realized. Tessa absorbed this information, recalculating. Harlan was moving faster than anticipated, using his institutional connections to neutralize her before the operation could proceed. If he succeeded in having her transferred to federal custody, everything would collapse. Chief, I need you to get a message to my people. There's a frequency, a contact protocol. I cannot. Okonkwo shook his head. They are watching everyone who has had contact with you. Fry is already under surveillance. If I make any unusual communications, I will end up in here with you. Then I need you to do something else. Tessa met his eyes, holding them with intensity. I need you to trust me. Whatever happens in the next 12 hours, whatever you see or hear, I need you to know that I am on the right side of this. Can you do that? Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I have served this Navy for 23 years. I have followed orders even when they did not make sense, kept my head down when I should have spoken up. But I am tired of watching good people get destroyed while men like Harlan prosper. He extended his hand. Whatever you need, Lieutenant. I am with you. She took his hand, feeling the calluses of decades of service, the strength of a man who had finally decided to stop being afraid. Thank you, Chief. He left, and the cell door locked behind him with a heavy click. Tessa returned to the cot and sat down, running through scenarios in her mind. Harlan thought he had won. He thought that, by putting her in this cell, he had removed the threat and bought himself time to clean up his operation. He was wrong. She reached up and touched the chain around her neck where her brother's dog tags still rested, hidden beneath her uniform. The guards had not thought to check there, had not realized that the simple metal tags were more than memorial tokens. Marcus, she whispered, I am so close. Just a little longer. She thought about the day she had learned of his death. The knock on the door, the officers in dress uniforms, her mother's scream that seemed to go on forever. She thought about the funeral, the flag they handed her, the empty words about service and sacrifice. She thought about the months afterward, when grief had transformed into something harder and sharper. The decision to find out who was responsible. The training she had volunteered for, the person she had become. She had given up everything for this mission. A normal life. Relationships. The woman she might have been if her brother had come home. But sitting in this cell, hours away from either victory or destruction, she knew she would make the same choice again. Some prices were worth paying. Some debts demanded to be settled. The sun set outside her tiny window, painting the concrete walls in shades of orange and red. Tomorrow, one way or another, everything would end. Commander Harlan came to see her at 0800 the next morning. He entered the cell with the satisfied air of a man who had already won, his uniform pressed and perfect, his smile carrying the particular cruelty of someone who enjoyed watching others suffer. Lieutenant Vance, or should I say, whoever you really are. He pulled a metal chair into the cell and sat down, crossing his legs casually. I have to admit, you had me concerned for a moment. All those questions, all that poking around. I thought maybe someone had finally sent a real investigator. Tessa remained seated on the cot, her posture relaxed, her expression giving nothing away. What changed your mind? You did. A real professional would have been more careful. Would not have gotten so attached to a petty officer who asked too many questions. Would not have trusted an intelligence analyst she barely knew. Harlan shook his head with mock disappointment. You made it personal, and personal makes people sloppy. Is that what happened to Peterson? He made it personal? Harlan's smile flickered, just for an instant. Peterson was a tragic case. A troubled young man with no family, no real connections. When he disappeared, nobody looked too hard. Nobody asked the difficult questions. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. That is what happens to people who threaten what I have built. They vanish, and the world moves on. Tessa felt cold rage building in her chest, but she kept it contained, locked away where it could not cloud her judgment. You sound confident for a man whose entire operation is about to collapse. Collapse? Harlan laughed. My operation has survived 3 investigations. I have friends at NCIS, friends at the Pentagon, friends in places you cannot even imagine. By this time tomorrow, you will be in federal custody facing espionage charges. Your handler, whoever they are, will disavow you. And I will continue doing what I have done for the past 6 years. 6 years. That is a long time. A lot of equipment. A lot of money. $2.3 million, to be precise. Harlan's eyes glittered with pride. Not that anyone will ever prove it. The accounts are offshore, the paper trail is clean, and the only witnesses are either dead, terrified, or sitting in a cell waiting to be shipped off to Leavenworth. And Meridian? Victor Ashworth? They will just keep operating? Meridian is untouchable. They have contracts with half the military branches, political connections that go all the way to Congress. Even if someone believed your little story, nobody would act on it. The system protects its own, Lieutenant. That is the first lesson of power. Tessa tilted her head slightly, studying him. You know, Commander, I have met men like you before. In Afghanistan, in Syria, in rooms that do not exist on any official map. They all had the same confidence, the same certainty that they were too smart, too connected, too powerful to face consequences. And what happened to them? They discovered they were wrong. Something shifted in Harlan's expression. A flicker of uncertainty quickly masked. He stood, straightening his uniform. Enjoy your last hours of freedom, Lieutenant. When NCIS arrives this afternoon, your little adventure ends. He walked out, and the cell door slammed shut behind him. Tessa waited until his footsteps faded completely. Then she reached beneath her uniform and removed the chain holding her brother's dog tags. She pressed the edge of one tag in a specific sequence, and a tiny LED light blinked green. The tags were more than memorial tokens. They contained a miniaturized emergency beacon, designed for operatives in hostile territory. She had activated at the moment they put her in this cell. For the past 16 hours, her exact location and status had been transmitting to her handler on an encrypted frequency that no base security system could detect. Help was not coming. Help was already here. At 1100 hours, the base alarms began to sound. Not the steady tone of a drill, but the urgent pulse of an actual security alert. Tessa heard shouting in the corridor outside, boots running, doors slamming. Minutes later, the door to her cell opened. Chief Okonkwo stood in the doorway, breathing hard, his eyes wide. Lieutenant, something is happening. There are helicopters landing on the parade ground. Black Hawks with no markings. Men in suits are heading for the command building. What about Harlan? He is in his office. I saw him through the window. He looks terrified. Tessa stood, smoothing her uniform despite its wrinkled state. Take me to the command building, Chief. I cannot just release you. There are procedures. The procedures just changed. Tessa stepped past him into the corridor. Those helicopters are carrying people with authority that supersedes everyone on this base, including Commander Harlan. If you want to be on the right side of what happens next, you will take me to them now. Okonkwo hesitated for only a moment. Then he nodded and led the way. They emerged into bright Florida sunshine and chaos. Sailors stood in clusters, watching as black-clad figures moved with purpose across the base. The unmarked helicopters sat on the parade ground, rotors still spinning. Tessa walked toward the command building with Okonkwo at her side, passing through the confusion like a stone through water. She could see figures inside the building through the windows. Men in suits, military officers, and, at the center of it all, Commander Brett Harlan, his face pale, his confident smile finally gone. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The command building lobby was filled with people Tessa had never seen before. Men in dark suits with earpieces and sidearms. Naval officers with stars on their collars. And at the center of the controlled chaos, a video screen had been set up, displaying the face of a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the hard eyes of someone who had spent decades making difficult decisions. Rear Admiral Catherine Stokes looked out from that screen like a force of nature, her voice cutting through the noise with absolute authority. I want Commander Harlan in this room in the next 60 seconds, she said. And someone explain to me why my officer is being held in your brig on charges that were fabricated by the target of her investigation. A Captain Tessa did not recognize stepped forward, his face ashen. Admiral, we were not aware of any investigation. Commander Harlan filed formal charges through proper channels. We followed protocol. Your protocol allowed a corrupt officer to imprison a federal operative and nearly compromise a 2-year investigation into treason. Stokes's voice could have frozen the Florida heat. I will be reviewing your protocols personally, Captain, after we clean up this mess. The door behind Tessa opened, and 2 of the suited men escorted Commander Harlan into the room. He had lost all traces of his earlier confidence. His face was gray, his movements uncertain, his eyes darting around the room, looking for allies and finding none. Then he saw Tessa, and whatever color remained in his face drained away entirely. You, he breathed. Me, she agreed. Admiral Stokes's voice cut through the moment. Commander Brett Harlan, you're being detained under the authority of the Secretary of Defense, pending formal charges of conspiracy, fraud, theft of military property, and providing material support to foreign adversaries. Do you understand these charges? Harlan's mouth opened and closed. This is insane. I am a decorated officer. I have served this Navy for 22 years. You cannot just accuse me of treason based on the word of some woman who showed up on my base a week ago. We're not basing these charges on her word alone. Stokes nodded to someone off-screen, and the display split to show financial records, shipping manifests, photographs. We have documentation of payments totaling $2.3 million deposited into offshore accounts in your name. We have evidence of military equipment diverted through Meridian Defense Solutions to intermediaries with confirmed ties to hostile foreign actors. We have testimony from multiple witnesses regarding your efforts to obstruct investigation and eliminate threats to your operation. Harlan stared at the evidence scrolling across the screen. His hands had begun to shake. This is a setup. Someone fabricated all of this, including the confession you made to Lieutenant Commander Vance in her cell this morning. Stokes raised an eyebrow. The one where you admitted to receiving $2.3 million and implied responsibility for the disappearance of Lieutenant Peterson? Harlan spun toward Tessa, his face contorting with rage. You recorded me. You were recording the whole time. Tessa reached up and touched the dog tags still hanging around her neck. My brother gave his life serving this country. The least I could do was make sure the people responsible for his death face justice. Your brother? Harlan's confusion was genuine. What does your brother have to do with any of this? The equipment you stole, Commander. The weapons and components that ended up in Syria and Yemen. Some of them were used to build the IED that killed Sergeant Marcus Vance 3 years ago. Tessa's voice remained steady, but her eyes burned with cold fire. You did not just steal from the military. You helped kill American soldiers. You helped kill my brother. The room fell silent. Even Admiral Stokes said nothing, allowing the weight of the accusation to settle over everyone present. Harlan seemed to shrink, his arrogance finally crumbling in the face of what he had done. I did not know, he whispered. I never knew where the equipment went. I just took the money. That does not matter, Tessa said quietly. You took it anyway. Admiral Stokes spoke again, her voice carrying the finality of judgment. Commander Brett Harlan, you will be remanded to federal custody and transported to Washington for formal proceedings. Your military career is over. Your freedom is over. And I personally guarantee that you will spend the rest of your life answering for every piece of equipment you stole, every dollar you took, and every American life your greed helped destroy. The suited men moved forward, taking Harlan by the arms. He did not resist. He seemed to have lost the capacity for resistance, his body sagging as they led him toward the door. As he passed Tessa, he stopped and looked at her one final time. Who are you? He asked. Who are you really? Tessa met his eyes without flinching. Lieutenant Commander Tessa Vance, United States Navy SEAL, and the last person you should have ordered to stand down. They took him away, and Tessa watched him go, feeling something loosen in her chest that had been wound tight for 3 long years. It was not over. There were still trials to face, testimony to give, a long road of legal proceedings before justice was fully served. But Harlan was finished. The pipeline was broken, and somewhere, she hoped, her brother could finally rest. The hours after Harlan's arrest moved with the strange rhythm of aftermath. Federal agents swept through the base, securing Warehouse 7, seizing computers and documents, interviewing personnel who suddenly remembered details they had been too afraid to share before. The machinery of justice, once set in motion, proved relentless. Tessa stood outside the command building, watching the controlled chaos unfold beneath the afternoon sun. She had given her initial statement to the lead investigator, a stern woman from the Department of Defense who had recorded every word with meticulous attention. There would be more interviews, more depositions, more official proceedings in the weeks and months ahead. But for now, her part in the immediate operation was complete. Lieutenant Commander Vance. She turned to find Lieutenant Fry approaching, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who had not slept in days, but also something else. Relief, perhaps, or at the beginning of it. Lieutenant Fry. Tessa allowed herself a small smile. I hear you were instrumental in obtaining the financial evidence. That took considerable courage. Fry shook her head. I just copied some files. You're the one who spent a week playing target while a corrupt commander tried to destroy you. We all played our parts. That is how operations work. They stood together in silence for a moment, watching as agents loaded boxes of evidence into unmarked vehicles. What happens now? Fry asked. To all of this? Harlan will face court-martial and federal prosecution. Meridian Defense Solutions is already being raided at their headquarters in Virginia. Victor Ashworth was arrested 2 hours ago, trying to board a flight to Switzerland. Tessa's voice carried quiet satisfaction. The investigation will expand. More names will surface. More arrests will follow. And Peterson? Frey's voice had softened on the name, carrying the weight of friendship and loss. The investigators will look for him, Tessa said gently. If there is anything to find, they will find it. His family, whatever family he chose for himself here, will have answers. He deserved better than what happened to him. Yes, he did. Tessa turned to face her fully. But because of what he started, because he had the courage to ask questions even when it was dangerous, we were able to finish this. His work mattered, Lieutenant. It mattered more than he ever knew. Fry nodded, blinking rapidly. Then she straightened, composing herself with visible effort. I should get back. They want me to help identify which personnel were involved and which were just following orders without knowing. That is important work. The line between complicity and ignorance is not always clear. No, it is not. Fry hesitated, then extended her hand. It was an honor working with you, Lieutenant Commander, even if I did not know that was what I was doing. Tessa shook her hand firmly. The honor was mine. You trusted your instincts when it would have been easier to look away. The Navy needs more officers like you. Fry walked away, and Tessa watched her go, thinking about the ripples that spread outward from moments of moral courage. Peterson had asked questions. Fry had remembered her friend and chosen to act. Okonkwo had finally stopped keeping his head down. Each small choice had contributed to something larger than any of them could have accomplished alone. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo found her an hour later, sitting on a bench near the parade ground where the helicopters had landed. He approached with 2 cups of coffee and offered one without a word. She accepted it gratefully. Hell of a week, he said, settling onto the bench beside her. I have had worse. He snorted. I do not doubt it. He sipped his coffee, staring out at the base that had been his home for 6 years. I have been thinking about Peterson, about all the times I noticed something wrong and chose not to see it, chose not to ask. You were protecting yourself. That is human. It is cowardice. Okonkwo's voice was harsh with self-judgment. I told myself I was being smart, being careful, but I was just being afraid. Tessa considered her response carefully. Fear is not the same as cowardice, Chief. Cowardice is letting fear make your choices for you permanently. You felt fear, but when it mattered, you chose differently. You came to my cell. You helped me reach the command building. You stood up after you did all the hard work. There is no hard work without the people willing to support it. She turned to look at him directly. You spent 23 years serving this Navy. One corrupt commander does not erase that. What matters now is what you do going forward. Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. The investigators want me to help them understand how the operation worked. The routines, the procedures, the ways Harlan kept people from asking questions. They say my perspective could help prevent this from happening again. That sounds like important work. It sounds like a chance to make things right. He finished his coffee and stood. I should get to it. He paused, looking down at her with something like respect. Lieutenant Commander, when you first walked onto this base, I thought you were just another paper pusher who would be gone in a month. I am glad I was wrong. So am I, Chief. He walked away, and Tessa sat alone on the bench, feeling the Florida heat press down on her shoulders. Around her, the base was slowly returning to normal rhythms, sailors moving between buildings, the ordinary business of military life resuming despite the extraordinary events of the past week. She reached up, and touched the dog tags beneath her uniform. The beacon was silent now, its purpose served, but the tags themselves remained what they had always been, a connection to her brother, a reminder of why she had chosen this path. The mission was complete. Harlan was in custody. The pipeline was broken, but there was still work to be done. Admiral Stokes arrived in person the following morning. Her helicopter touched down on the parade ground at 0900, and she emerged with the commanding presence of someone who had spent 40 years bending the military to her will. Tessa met her on the tarmac, snapping to attention as the admiral approached. At ease, Lieutenant Commander. Stokes returned her salute with crisp efficiency. Walk with me. They moved across the base together, the admiral setting a pace that belied her age. Sailors stopped and stared as they passed, recognizing the stars on Stokes's collar and wondering what could have brought such senior brass to Mayport in person. You did exceptional work here, Stokes said without preamble. The evidence you gathered, the witnesses you cultivated, the way you maintained cover under extreme pressure. It will be studied at the farm for years to come. I had good support, ma'am. Lieutenant Fry, Chief Okonkwo, my handler. I could not have done it alone. No one does anything alone. But someone has to be willing to walk into the fire first. That was you. Stokes glanced at her with eyes that had seen decades of operations, successes, and failures. I read your brother's file. Sergeant Marcus Vance, exemplary service record, killed in action 3 years ago by an IED in Kandahar province. Yes, ma'am. The investigation afterward flagged anomalies in the equipment supply chain, but could not trace them to a specific source. The case went cold. Stokes stopped walking, turning to face Tessa directly. You picked it up on your own. Spent 2 years following threads that official investigators had abandoned. Applied for programs that would give you the skills and access to continue the hunt, all without any guarantee that you would find what you were looking for. Tessa met the Admiral's gaze steadily. He was my brother, ma'am. I cannot let it go. Most people would have. Most people do. They grieve, they move on, they accept that some questions never get answered. Stokes studied her with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. But you're not most people. You turned grief into purpose. You became something extraordinary because you refused to accept that evil men could escape consequences. I just wanted justice for Marcus. And you got it. The equipment that killed your brother has been traced directly to shipments diverted through Harlan's operation. The intermediaries who sold it to the insurgents have been identified. Some are already in custody. Others will be soon. Stokes placed a hand on Tessa's shoulder, a rare gesture of personal connection. Your brother's death was not meaningless. Because of what you did here, dozens of other soldiers will not suffer the same fate. Supply chains across 3 theaters of operation are being audited. Meridian's network is being dismantled piece by piece. You did not just get justice for Marcus. You prevented future injustice for people you will never meet. Tessa felt something shift in her chest, a weight she had carried for 3 years, so constant that she had forgotten it was there, suddenly lighter. Not gone, perhaps never gone, but transformed into something she could bear. Thank you, Admiral. That means more than I can express. Stokes nodded and resumed walking. Now, we need to discuss your future. Your cover at Mayport is obviously blown. Your face will be in reports, your name in testimony. You cannot return to covert logistics work. I understand, ma'am. I am prepared to accept whatever assignment is appropriate. The Admiral smiled, a rare expression that softened her stern features. I was hoping you would say that, because I have something specific in mind. They had reached the base chapel, a small white building that stood apart from the busier sections of the installation. Stokes stopped at the entrance. There's a new task force being formed. Joint service, focused on supply chain integrity and counter-corruption operations. We need people who understand how these networks operate, who have proven they can work undercover, who have the skills to dismantle operations like Harlan's before they cost American lives. Stokes turned to face her. I want you to help lead it. Tessa stared at her, momentarily speechless. Ma'am, I am honored, but there are officers with far more experience who would be better suited. There are officers with more years of service. There are not officers with more commitment to this specific mission. Stokes raised an eyebrow. You spent 3 years hunting the people who killed your brother. You succeeded where official investigations failed. You built alliances, gathered evidence, and brought down a corrupt commander while sitting in his brig. That is exactly the kind of leadership this task force needs. The offer hung in the air between them, enormous in its implications. A chance to continue the work she had started. A chance to prevent other families from receiving the knock on the door that had shattered her world. A chance to make Marcus's death mean something beyond a single operation at a single base. I would be honored to accept, ma'am. Good. Stokes extended her hand, and Tessa shook it firmly. Report to Washington in 2 weeks for briefing. Until then, take some time. Visit your family. Remember what you are fighting for. The Admiral walked away, leaving Tessa standing before the chapel doors. After a moment, she pushed them open and stepped inside. The chapel was empty, quiet, filled with the soft light filtering through stained glass windows. Tessa walked to the front pew and sat down, alone with the silence and her thoughts. She removed the chain from around her neck and held her brother's dog tags in her palm, feeling the familiar weight of the metal, the edges worn smooth from years of contact with her skin. I did it. Marcus, she whispered. I found them. I stopped them. The silence offered no response, but she had not expected one. Some conversations were not about answers. They were about acknowledgement, about honoring what had been lost, about finding the strength to continue. She sat in that quiet space for a long time, letting 3 years of grief and rage and determination finally settle into something like peace. Not an ending, a transformation. The work would continue. But now it would continue with purpose, with resources, with the full weight of official sanction behind it. And somewhere, she hoped, her brother was proud. Tessa spent her final day at Mayport saying goodbyes she had not expected to need. The base that had been hostile territory a week ago had transformed into something else entirely. Word had spread about what she had done, who she really was, and the sailors she passed now looked at her with expressions ranging from awe to gratitude to simple respect. She found Petty Officer Vega in the hospital, preparing for discharge. His bruises had faded to yellow and green, his split lip healing into a thin line that would eventually become an almost invisible scar. When she entered his room, he tried to stand at attention from his wheelchair. At ease, Petty Officer. She smiled and gestured for him to stay seated. I wanted to check on you before I leave. Vega relaxed, though his eyes still held the slightly starstruck look of someone who had learned his friendly logistics officer was actually a Navy SEAL on a classified mission. I'm fine, Mom. Doctors say I can return to duty next week. He paused, his expression growing serious. I heard what happened. With Commander Harlan. With everything. You heard correctly. I also heard that the evidence I gathered, the discrepancies I documented, helped build the case against him. Vega's voice carried a note of wonder. I thought I was just keeping records to prove I was not crazy. I did not know it would actually matter. It mattered more than you know. Tessa sat down in the chair beside his bed. You saw something wrong, and you refused to ignore it. That takes courage, especially when everyone around you is looking the other way. The Navy needs sailors like you. I was just doing my job, ma'am. No, you were doing more than your job. You were doing what was right. There is a difference. She leaned forward slightly. I understand you have been offered a position with the Base Inspector General's office. A chance to help prevent future corruption. Vega nodded, a hint of pride breaking through his humble demeanor. They said my attention to detail would be valuable, that I could help train others to spot the warning signs I noticed. You should take it. The work matters, and you're good at it. I will, ma'am. He met her eyes directly. Because of you. Because you showed me that one person can make a difference, even against people with all the power and all the connections. Tessa stood, extending her hand. He shook it firmly, his grip stronger than she expected from someone still recovering from a beating. Take care of yourself, Petty Officer Vega. You too, Lieutenant Commander. And thank you for everything. She found Chief Okonkwo at the motor pool, supervising a routine vehicle inspection with the methodical attention he brought to everything. When he saw her approaching, He dismissed the junior sailors and walked to meet her halfway. "Leaving today?" he asked. "This afternoon. Flight to Washington, then home for a week before I report to my new assignment." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "I heard about the task force. Counter-corruption operations. Important work. It is, and I was hoping you might consider being part of it." His eyebrows rose. "Me? I am 6 months from retirement. I was planning to finish my time quietly and disappear into civilian life." "Plans change." Tessa smiled slightly. "The task force needs experienced personnel who understand how military operations actually work. People who have seen corruption up close and know how it hides. People who finally got tired of keeping their heads down." Okonkwo was silent for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his features. "You know, my wife has been telling me for years that I needed to do something meaningful before I got too old to matter. She's going to be insufferable when I tell her I'm extending my service." "Is that a yes?" "It is a yes, Lieutenant Commander." He extended his hand, and she shook it warmly. "Someone has to keep an eye on you. Make sure you do not get yourself thrown in any more brigs." "I appreciate the concern, Chief." They parted with mutual respect, two people who had found unexpected alliance in the midst of crisis and emerged with something lasting. Her final stop was the parade ground, where a small formation had assembled without her knowledge. Admiral Stokes stood at the front, flanked by the base commander and several senior officers. Behind them, arranged in neat rows, stood Lieutenant Fry, Chief Okonkwo, and dozens of sailors Tessa had never spoken to but who had apparently heard her story. "Lieutenant Commander Vance," Stokes called out. Front and center, Tessa walked forward, her confusion evident but her bearing perfect. She stopped before the Admiral and saluted crisply. "At ease." Stokes held a small velvet box in her hands. In recognition of exceptional performance of duty, personal courage in the face of grave danger, and unwavering commitment to the integrity of the United States Navy, it is my honor to present you with the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. She opened the box, revealing the bronze medal with its distinctive ribbon. The formation behind her applauded as Stokes pinned it to her uniform. "This is unexpected, ma'am," Tessa said quietly. "Justice usually is." Stokes stepped back and saluted. "Fair winds and following seas, Lieutenant Commander. We will see you in Washington." The formation dispersed, sailors returning to their duties, and Tessa stood alone on the parade ground with a medal on her chest and a future spreading out before her. That evening, she boarded a military transport bound for the capital. As the plane climbed above the Florida coastline, she looked out the window at the base growing smaller below. Mayport, where she had arrived as a ghost hunting shadows and departed as something else entirely. She reached up and touched the dog tags beneath her uniform, feeling the familiar weight against her heart. "One more mission complete, Marcus," she whispered. "But the work is not finished. There are more people like Harlan out there, more corruption to expose, more soldiers to protect." The plane banked north, and the sun set behind them, painting the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. She thought about her mother, waiting at home, who had lost a son and nearly lost a daughter to the same relentless pursuit of justice. She thought about the family she might have someday, if she ever found the space between missions to build one. She thought about all the soldiers who would never know her name, but whose lives might be saved because she refused to stop fighting. The work would continue. The mission would evolve. But for the first time in 3 years, Tessa Vance felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about what resonated most with you. Tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength, or drop a comment about your favorite moment in the story. We would love to hear from you.